Good morning, everybody. I'm back here in London. And, you know, I'm getting bored with this every single morning constant diet of negativity that we get from mainstream media and so many in our political class. Today's is in The Observer. Will Hutton writes, life expectancy figures have gone into decline, but abandoning Brexit could reverse this. And within the article, and it's very nice of him, actually, he calls me an evil genius. Well, very happy Sunday morning to you, Will, as well. So there you are. Brexit means you're going to die younger. Brexit means there could be huge pandemics. There is, and we heard earlier on this morning, people telling us on LBC that there's huge demand now to reverse Brexit, to stop Brexit. It's all going wrong. And the debate that goes on constantly is within political parties, splits in the Tory party, some splits in the Labour Party. And the one group of people who are not involved in the Brexit debate at all are you, the public. No. You're not supposed to have a say. Leave it to your betters. Leave it to those who are much cleverer than you and understand what you need in your life. In fact, the only time since the Brexit referendum on 23rd of June 16 that you've been consulted was in a general election in which both the Labour and Conservative parties told you, vote for us and we'll leave the single market, we'll take back control of our borders, and we know now, of course, a year on, that simply wasn't true. They were fibbing to us because they wanted us to vote for them. Well, I have a hunch, I really do have a hunch, that if the public were given any sort of lead on this, if the public were given the opportunity to express their opinion, then our politicians might just be in for the shock of their lives. Well, lo and behold, I turned to the centre page this morning of The Sun on Sunday and saw a very, very powerful piece of polling. So just before I came on air, I spoke to The Sun on Sunday's political editor, David Wooding, and I asked him, how is it that Brexit voters in the country are really feeling at the moment?
We asked quite a lot of questions on Brexit, Nigel, because there's been so many people suggesting that people are having buyer's remorse and that they want a second referendum. And so we dug down into it and asked a little bit more deeply and found that actually attitudes are hardening. 62% of people in our Delta poll don't want to, they haven't changed their mind. In fact, they're far more intent on believing what they believe in. Okay, that's both sides. But the people who have changed their mind, there's only 11% of leavers have changed their mind. But crucially, the people who have changed their mind most are Remainers. 15% of them have changed their minds. Now, I got my little fact pack out and a pen and did a few maths, and it works out that there's about 2.4 million Remainers in an election would vote Leave now, as opposed to about 1.9 leavers who might vote Remain. So if there was a second referendum, there's no doubt it could possibly go the other way. It could be even stronger in favour of Leave.
What is the key reason, David, that Remainers are now saying no, Brexit's the right thing?
Well, there's no great explanation for that, but I would suggest one of the reasons is we were always told that the European Union isn't ruling our lives as much as we think. And what's become clear as we've tried to disentangle ourselves from the grip of Brussels is that, in fact, it's far more entrenched and deep-rooted into our lives than we ever thought in the first place. And they've also been a little bit put off by the bullying and the intransigence of Brussels, the unelected people who are pushing us around. And thirdly, Project Fear. We were told that the sky was going to fall in, and it's 2 years since Brexit, and we're all getting along quite nicely, thank you. It's just the negotiations that are causing us all the trouble.
Yes, and also a constant diet of negativity. I mean, just put on the BBC, put on Sky News, and every single day there are endless stories about disaster that could befall the country if there's a no-deal Brexit. Would it be fair to say that our political class in Westminster, in both the main parties, are pretty out of touch with public opinion?
Yes, indeed. One of the things the poll shows is that nearly half of people, 48%, think that the political classes are deliberately dragging their heels, trying to make heavy weather of Brexit talks in order to convince the public that they have to change their mind. It's just too difficult to do this. Look, we told you it was going to be hard. Look at the mess it's creating. Let's just not do it, eh? And I think that's what's happening here. They're deliberately putting up obstacles that aren't there. We've seen it from the European Union with the Irish border, and I think more and more people are seeing through this. And the message that comes through loud and clear in our poll today is just get on with it. We've given you the instructions to do it. Stop messing around. Just get on with it.
David, as you probably know, I'm about to go back on the road and do some public rallies and get a battle bus going. I think from this I might get quite a good reception.
It does look good. It does look that way. I mean, the main thing that comes through from the poll about the politicians, the mainstream politicians, Theresa May, Jeremy Corbyn, and Vince Cable, they're all in negative popularity. Nobody likes any of them and what they're doing, but nevertheless, people still feel that Brexit has to happen, and I think that's the main message from that. Nearly half of Brits think we should leave the EU on March the 29th, with or without a deal, like it or not. That comes through quite emphatically in our poll.
Well, that was David Wooding, political editor of Sun on Sunday, and let's just repeat those polls. Should we just leave on March the 29th as planned, deal or no deal? Yes, 47%. No, 28%. That is a pretty massive margin saying let's just get on with it. And it does very much confirm what I think. I think our political class are, well, at best, out of touch with the electorate, but actually I think they're willfully trying to betray the Brexit vote. They don't think you should have had the referendum in the first place, and they certainly don't think you should have defied them, the big businesses, the big banks, and of course we even defied President Obama. How dare we? So folks, do you agree with the findings in this poll? Do you see yourself as one of the 28% who says no, we can't leave without having another referendum? And if that's how you feel, call me on 0345 6060 973. Or maybe you're one of the 47% who says, just get on with it, deal or no deal. If that's how you feel, text to 84850. And please, let me know. Do you think I'm right to go back on the road with a Leave Means Leave campaign? Have I got it right? Have I got it wrong? You're never generally shy of telling me where I've gone wrong, in which case tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC. At LBC, of course, you can call as well. And as ever, you can watch us on Facebook and you can comment there too. Richard says to me by SMS, the EU Commission has no intention of offering any deal. There's more chance of finding the lost ark at a village jumble sale. Well, that's a nice, spicy way to start. And Vince Cable's been tweeting this morning. He says, I understand Nigel Farage returning to UK politics. The narrative of Brexit betrayal makes life more difficult for Theresa May and any attempt at compromise. Now there's a clearer choice between a no-deal Brexit and a people's vote with the option to stay in. Well, Vince, I just would say this to you. I do think that with proper leadership and with rallying proper business support, I do actually think that we could go to the European Commission and say, right, we're pressing the reset button. Look, guys, there's an awful lot of German motor cars driving around the UK. There's a heck of a lot of Prosecco going to be drunk at barbecues this afternoon. We are buying from you £80 billion worth of goods more every year than the other way round, and we'd be quite happy with a Canada-style trade deal with you, which of course would mean no open borders, no financial contributions. And I do think we should have one last stab at that, but with them genuinely understanding that if that doesn't happen, we will walk away, and they will probably get much more badly hurt by this than we will. So I think there is a good motive for saying, let's try and do that deal. But if not, we'll have a World Trade Organization deal. All this stuff about no deal, there is no such thing as a no deal. There are World Trade Organization rules out there. Countries like America trade with most of the world on those rules and do incredibly well. The point here is, everyone's trying to confuse this with economic arguments. The vote was a political choice. We voted leave. I feel, you know something, I feel more strongly about this now than I did at the time of the referendum back in June 2016, and that's because of the way the politicians have behaved. It's despicable, in my view. Tell me I'm right, tell me I'm wrong. Liam in Liverpool, good morning.
Good morning, Nigel. How are you?
I am well. So how do you see all of this, Liam? I mean, do you accept the findings of this poll, that there are a very big margin of people just want us to leave?
To be honest, mate, I don't. I find that number to be... I believe that number to be much lower. First of all, can I just say I'm glad that you are stepping back into politics and putting your face out there, because I think you were the face of Leave for a lot of people when they were voting during the referendum. Mm-hmm. So I am glad to see you back, and glad to see somebody passionate enough to actually take a stand. Basically, from my perspective, I'm 20 years old. I was 19 when I voted. The first time I ever voted, and I did vote to remain. I've done my research. I wasn't really...
Just speak into that mouthpiece a little bit more clearly, Liam.
I do apologise.
That's it, right, I've got you. Keep still. So the last I got is you were 19, it was your first vote, and you voted Remain, yeah?
Yes, I did. Like I said, I wasn't very much interested in politics, but I sat down with my grandparents.
Yeah.
Important it was for my future. So I've done a bit of research, weighed up the pros and cons from what I saw, from my perspective, and I decided to remain. Obviously, is exhausting.
Look, Liam, I keep losing it. We're going to try and get you on a landline. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. We'll wait to hear what Liam has to say. It's now 10:15. Well, earlier on this morning on LBC with Ian Payne, Tom Baldwin from the People's Vote campaign, a former Blair advisor, was telling us that he sees a significant shift happening in the country, and that is why their campaign has just received a £1 million donation from Julian Dunkerton, a multi-millionaire, and they're going to spend money on polling to drill down and to examine why people think it's all going to be a disaster. Mr. Dunkerton believes there is a shift going on in the country. Mr. Dunkerton, I'm very pleased to be able to tell you that you're absolutely right. There is a shift. As we've just learned from David Wooding's figures, with the Sun on Sunday poll, there are something like 2.4 million people who voted Remain, believing it was the right thing to do, who have now changed their mind and would vote to leave. And I honestly believe one of the reasons behind this is just the sheer behaviour of the Barniers, the Verhofstadts, the Junckers. You know, the commissioners like Barnier, unelected, unremovable, dictating, humiliating a British Prime Minister throughout these negotiations. And I think people see that and think, this is a pretty anti-democratic, authoritarian, unpleasant club. Is it any wonder that Italy now has a Eurosceptic government? Is it any wonder that in the elections to take place on the 9th of September in Sweden, the Eurosceptic party may well win that election? So I think that's what the shift is. I think our politicians don't understand it, they don't get it, and one of my reasons for going out round the country is I want to teach these politicians a lesson they'll never forget. You should not betray the British public when they voted in a referendum. Right, we have a full switchboard. Let's get moving. Rita is a first-time caller from Westminster. Good morning, Rita.
Good morning.
So how do you feel, Rita? Are you one of the 47% who just says, let's get on with it and leave, or one of the 28% who thinks, maybe we need to have another vote?
Well, first of all, Nigel, can I say thank you so much for returning actively to the debate, i.e. planning to go and vote, which I think is fantastic.
Well, that's kind of
yes, I am one of the 47% who thinks we should leave. Unlike you, I don't even think we should give them any more chance to negotiate. I think we should walk out and move forward. We have India, China, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, America, countries who are willing to do... In fact, they're waiting to do deals with us. We're only wasting time with these people who are never going to see our point of view.
Rita, you're probably right. I've always been just too reasonable in everything I've done in politics. I should be a bit more decisive. Now, all I'm saying is, Rita, that from the start of these negotiations, the one thing Barnier has known is that Mrs May was never going to walk out. Never going to walk out. I think if you press the reset button and go and say, no, actually, we really are going to go, I wonder whether that might bear some fruit. But you may be right. We're 2 years on from this. And when you hear, Rita, when you hear the British Medical Association telling you that if there's no deal, I mean, there could be a huge pandemic in this country. I mean, doesn't that worry you?
Well, no, you see, I think it all goes back to exactly what we do now. We are propping up a community of people, the European community. We're propping them up. They're going to self-destruct within the next 5 to 10 years anyway. The money that we're injecting into this undemocratic organisation should now be spent on the NHS, on our police, on our education, areas in which we are failing and falling behind.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, Rita, just looking at you live in London. Just looking at the explosion of knife crime, and by the way, it's not happening just in London, but I think the argument for more bobbies on the beat, just generally rising crime across this country, I think those arguments are very, very powerful. And Rita, I tell you the other thing I want to ask you. The other piece of polling here that really stands out is when these people were asked, do you think the political classes are deliberately trying to make heavy weather of the Brexit talks in order to get us to change our mind? 48% agree, only 12% disagree. So it seems to me, Rita, that what's happening right now is we're losing faith in our politicians, perhaps even in our entire democratic system.
Well, I 100% agree. The sad reality is many of our politicians are being paid by Europe. Many of our organisations are funded by Europe, whether it's 1% or 50% is irrelevant. So they're all self-serving. Gina Miller, self-serving. This Julian Duncan, if he has so much money, why don't you give it to a reasonable charity instead of wasting it on prolonging an exercise which has already taken too long? We have a democratic vote in this country. The referendum was to leave, and as you say, we're 2 years on and no further to the end.
Yeah, I mean, Rita, I think these people are almost trying to deliberately trip the country up. We've chosen a course, we're trying to get there, and they just want to trip us up and try and stop the whole thing. Rita, thank you for your call. Thank you for your passion. Nigel, I disagree with you on many things, but on Brexit and the democratic mandate that has to be upheld and carried through, I do, says Tony. Well, Tony, this is actually about more than just whether we voted to leave or remain. It's actually about trust. We were told, were we not, by Mr. Cameron and others, we were told clearly, you decide and we will carry out your will. And that is simply not happening. Morning, Nige. I drive a cab. The number one Brexit comment I hear is former reluctant Remainers who would now vote to leave. Funny how my world is so different when I turn on the BBC, Sky Channel 4, etc. The politicians could not be more out of touch with reality. Keith, I often think London cabbies have a pretty good sense of where the public are thinking. Let's go to Chris, who's calling from Richmond. Chris, good morning.
Good morning. A couple of points I wanted to make to you, Nigel. Regarding the NHS, I don't know if you... I was interested to read a Twitter conversation with someone called Rachel Clark yesterday. You described the BMA as disgraceful, and then she made some rather interesting points about the fact that there's been a massive drop in the number of nurses coming to this country. I noticed you didn't choose to reply to that, Nigel. I wonder why that was.
Well, I had about 20,000 messages yesterday, Chris. It was rather a busy day, you might not be surprised to hear. And also, let me just say something. One of the main arguments here, and by the way, at 11 o'clock today, I'm going to talk about university. I'm going to talk about the fact that so many people are coming out of university with debt and almost not any improvement of their job prospects, whilst at the same time, Chris, we're not training enough nurses, we're not training enough engineers. There's a real problem here. And if we need to import nurses, Chris, from all over the world, we can do so. I mean, we always have to some degree. But shouldn't we, Chris, actually be using this moment as a means of rethinking about our young people and getting people actually trained in skills?
Well, maybe, Nigel, but it's going to take an awful long time to train nurses. The other point I wanted to make here...
Well, why not make a start, Chris? Why not, rather than relying on foreign labour for everything, why not start training our own young people to get vocational skills and jobs that they can actually work in for the rest of their lives?
Well, I don't think anyone has a problem with that, but we don't need Brexit to do it. The other point I want to make, people's votes, is which upon this conversation...
Yes, go on.
20 years ago, Nigel, I made a massive decision with respect to my life. I was offered a job as an accountancy tutor, having just qualified, and I was offered a job at a start-up. I chose the job at a start-up. I'd accepted the other job, and as a result of that decision, by joining the start-up, I made a significant difference to my personal situation financially. I'm in the house I'm in now because I made that decision. If I'd listened to the headhunter who said, you made a committed decision, you can't change your mind, you can't back out, my life would be very different to the one it is than one it is now. But apply that to Brexit. If people are not able to change their minds, Nigel, Well, I don't understand why. Because if you can change your mind about holidays...
we did change our minds, Chris. We were told the common market was lovely and cuddly. We were given a referendum on it, and we chose by a majority of 2-1 to stay in the common market. We then over the course of the next few years saw it morph into something very different. We were asked, "Do you want to change your minds?" And we said, "Yes, we have changed our minds."
On false premises, Nigel. Yes, or answer me.
No. What? Name me one totally false premise.
Well, Gisela Stewart, Boris Johnson, Nigel Gove, there will be a points-based immigration system by the next election. It's already been dropped, Nigel. Correct or incorrect?
Well, and Chris, by the way, that is absolutely what people voted for in the referendum, and it's absolutely what they still want. There's nothing false about that. Brexit voters...
You know it's not going to happen.
Well, Chris, here's my point, right? OK, here is where you and I are going to agree. I know what people voted for, and the people know what they voted for, and they're sick to death of being talked down to and told they're stupid, and they didn't understand, because they blooming well did. Chris, my point, and the reason for me going back on the road, is I trust the people, I do not trust our politicians, and the reason that pledge for an Australian-style point system has been dropped by Boris Johnson and others is because they're part of a political class, and they're all trying to water down Brexit, and what I want us to have, Chris, is the Brexit we voted for.
On 2 points. Firstly, they've dropped it because it's not feasible, and actually...
Not feasible?
Changed it. No, because the Australian... Actually, if you want to bring immigration down, which was clearly the whole point of this, as far as you're concerned, actually, an Australian-style pointing system, as was pointed out at the time, actually leads to more immigration.
What? No. An Australian-style point system leads to as many people as you think you need in the country, but what you're doing... You're not just looking at numbers, you're looking at the type of people as well. That's the point, surely.
Well, first, it's not going to happen, so we know that. We can at least agree on that. Second question...
I don't agree. No, it is going to happen. It is going to happen. British politics, at some point, British politics has to start reflecting what people want.
Fine, Nigel. What about the next point? Is Turkey going to join the European Union, yes or no, tomorrow?
They've been paying Turkey billions for years, billions, in pre-accession aid. It is the passionate desire of the European Union for Turkey to join. It has been their passionate desire for a long time. Indeed, it was one of Mr Cameron's own personal pet loves. He wanted Turkey to join the European Union. Since Mr Erdogan has taken it down the Islamist route, it does not look very likely at this moment in time. But has it been for 20 years? Has it been for 20 years? And what, at the time of the referendum, did David Cameron want Turkey to join the EU? Yes. Did the European Commission want Turkey to join the EU? Yes, absolutely.
But there's 27 other countries involved, and certainly a lot of them. So you have just admitted on live radio that it is unlikely that Turkey is going to join the European Union.
In the short term, because of what's happened with its government. But Chris,
how many of the conditions have they met? I think it's about 28 or 30. How many of those conditions have been met as of today, Nigel? You should know.
Well, the problem, Chris, is that whatever chapters were agreed are now subject to debate because there are serious human rights concerns about what Erdogan is doing. But is the European Union an expansionist bloc? Does it want the Ukraine to join? Of course it does. Does it want Turkey to join? Of course it does. It's an empire. The European Union is a political empire that seeks expansion. Can we agree on that?
Well, only for the right people. But the point is, you never said...
Do you agree that it's an expansionist organisation?
Yeah, but only under certain conditions. Turkey has been trying to join the European Union for about 35 years, Nigel. 35 years.
I think 1961 they first started discussing it. But the point is the British government wanted Turkey to join, therefore it was a legitimate debate about EU enlargement. Chris, do you accept the Sun's findings that a very big majority wants us just to leave rather than have a people's vote?
Well, there's polls on everything. There's another poll was saying complete opposite this morning, that more people prefer the idea of a people's vote than before. You still haven't answered my point. Years ago, I made a life-changing decision, and I was allowed to change my mind. If I'd taken your approach, that headhunter would have committed me and said, "You know what, Chris, you can't change your mind about that job. You've got to take it."
Chris, we changed our minds. We changed our minds. We had 40 years of the entire political establishment saying the referendum in 1975 was the be-all and end-all. We were given the chance. We have changed our minds. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's now 10:31. The political class do not want the Brexit that we voted for, but the Sun on Sunday poll shows that the public still very much do, and by a strong margin, big majority, want us to leave at 11 p.m. on March the 29th next year. Deal or no deal, they're not listening to constant Project Fear. Now, fascinatingly, political machinations. Just a month after the Chequers deal, which so many in the Conservative Party and elsewhere saw as a complete sellout and total betrayal, there's now a new narrative coming from the government and from Dominic Raab. Front page of today's Sunday Telegraph: Tories launch Project No Fear as no deal scenario is set out. So they're now telling us, a month after they wanted us to become a vassal state and telling us it was the only way forwards, that they're preparing for a no deal, and they're going to start telling Europe they've got more to lose than we've got to lose, and actually some of the things I've been saying for years. Why are they doing this? Is this a genuine change of heart by the government? No, folks. I'll tell you why they're doing it. There's a wild beast out there on the loose, a dangerous, unkempt animal, wild, out of control. And it's called Boris Johnson. And they fear that with a Tory party conference coming up, and with Boris having now put himself very much on the side of the Eurosceptics, which actually is where 70 to 75% of the Conservative Party are, they fear that if the Prime Minister was to have another disaster at conference, perhaps some of you can remember the cringe-making speech last year, and if Bojo is seen to be the champion, then the 48 letters go in, and there's a leadership challenge. This is all being done to stop a Boris leadership challenge. Do not please take it at face value. Theresa May will not opt for a WTO deal. She wants us to remain as closely tied to all elements of the European project as she possibly can. Now, earlier on, I was talking to a 19-year-old Brexit voter called Liam in Liverpool. He explained to me why he'd voted to remain. He's, I hope, back on the line. Liam, hello. Liam.
Hello, Nigel. You okay?
Right. Okay. Carry on. You told us that you'd voted. You told us that you'd voted Remain. So, where does that leave you now? 2 years on.
It leaves me very much so still wanting to remain. To be honest, what you mentioned before about the 47% want to leave, I believe that number to be very much lower due to Theresa May's handling of the negotiations. I don't see how we can have somebody leading the negotiations who didn't want Brexit in the first place.
Well, on that, Liam, Liam, on that point, I would agree with you. And interestingly, if you look at Theresa May's personal poll rating, you know, she's running at minus 26% and Corbyn's running at minus 35%. And do you know something, Liam? I'm a little bit older than you. I can't remember any time in my adult life when both main party leaders were so unpopular. So I suggest to you, Liam, what the polling is telling you is the public have little confidence in May, don't believe in the way she's doing Brexit, but they still actually want Brexit.
That's what it seems like to me, but then again, that makes no sense. How can this country, as a democratic society, believe in one person to lead the negotiations for our future, for my future, and for my children's future? How can we trust this one woman to lead us to a better place when she didn't want the Brexit in the first place?
I couldn't agree more.
She wants to go in with a hard Brexit or no deal, whatever. Brexit means Brexit. Now, you said 47% want to leave.
Well, I think, Liam, the important thing here is that this 47% just want to leave. They're not interested in whatever the deal is. They're not listening to the scaremongering. They're saying it was a democratic decision, a political, not an economic decision, a political decision to leave the European Union, and they want it carried out.
Based on what, though? Because I believe the Leave voters to have been slightly misled.
Liam, we keep hearing this. We keep hearing, but why don't we simplify this, Liam? Why don't we simplify this? The vote to remain was to remain part of a European political project. The vote to leave was to be independent. That, at the end of the day, is what this is really all about, isn't it?
Do you know what it is? And like I said, like I keep saying, I did vote to leave. I did vote to remain. Sorry, but we have the country as one has voted to leave now. Okay, fair enough with that. I don't believe in all this nonsense about the second referendum. I think it's complete nonsense. That just goes against the democratic society. You know.
Okay,
I don't believe it. If we vote to leave, then we need to leave. My point is, I believe we need somebody who is capable of handling negotiations.
Yes.
She's not in any fit state to lead.
Liam, I 100% agree with you. And can I also use a word to describe you? You are a Democrat, because you accept, although what you wanted didn't happen, that the will of the people must be obeyed. Thank you, Liam, very much indeed. We sort of got there in the end with that phone call, didn't we? The referendum result, says Catherine from South Wales, sent shockwaves through Parliament. A lot of MPs rejected the result to leave and are still in denial. The idea of a second vote on Leave Remain is an absolute betrayal of democracy. The people have already made their intentions known. As a Leave voter, I feel if a second vote was to take place, I would lose all faith in our democracy and Parliament. Well, Catherine, you believe that passionately, clearly, as a Leave voter, but I thought, wasn't it interesting that Liam, as a young Remain voter, says, look, whatever I think, we have to get on and do this, and that actually the problem, he thought, was Theresa May. Difficult, really, to disagree. I get on Twitter. I was originally a Remainer, but I have since done a complete 180. I want us to walk away today. No deal, and I'm not alone. Friends and family are shifting for Remain to Leave too. Lefty Remainers might not get the result they want from a second referendum. Well, actually, that's very interesting, isn't it? I mean, that was the point David Wooding was making, is if we went through it all again, you may well find a much bigger margin of people would vote to leave. And yet, believe me, they won't give up. They will not give up. The interests of the giant multinational businesses are very much tied to this European project. They want unlimited cheap labour. They want a regulatory rule book that they effectively write themselves to the detriment of small and medium-sized businesses. The big businesses love the EU club. It's the best thing that's ever happened to them. And it's why, in many ways, this is a battle between the little people and the big people. It really, really is. Sam is a first-time caller from Lincoln. Hi, Sam.
Hi, Nigel. How are you?
Good morning. I'm very well indeed. So, do you believe these polling figures or not?
Well, in actual fact, I haven't seen the polling figures. I don't normally read The Sun.
OK.
So I wasn't aware of them. But what I would like, Nigel, would you offer us all some clarity on your position with regards to the second referendum?
Yeah, I don't want a second referendum. If we have one, and I've been saying, Sam, for a long time, wake up, Leave voters. The Remain side are organising for a second referendum. And I said that 6 months ago, and I wasn't wrong. Mr Soros' money is coming in. Mr Blair is there. Mr Clegg is there. Mr Cable is there. There's now a whole People's Vote campaign. So I've said to Leave voters, prepare yourself mentally, because the other side are getting ready for this. Now, I very much...
Could I just dip in there?
Yep.
Because the reason why I'm intrigued is because you gave an interview to the Mirror on the 16th of May 2016, just before the referendum. Which
has been so wildly misquoted, Sam, I can't believe it. In which I said if it was 48-52 for Remain, there would be some unreconciled in the Conservative Party who would see it as unfinished business, but that in reality it would be at least 25 years before we had another referendum. And I promise you one thing, Sam, if Remain had won, there'd be no discussion of a second referendum. It wouldn't even be on the agenda.
I would like to say something else as well, which is I think all of us have been let down, because I think the referendum structure was poor. I think it should have had a much higher margin, because effectively what we're saying now is that under 1 million... What was the actual figure voting Leave more than Remain out of the those that voted?
Well, getting on for 3.9% or something like that.
And what does that translate to in actual numbers, actual citizens?
A couple of million.
OK, so a couple of million more...
Which actually, Sam, is a massive margin compared to the votes people get to become Prime Minister. It was it was the greatest exercise in democracy in the history of the United Kingdom.
Well, I disagree with that as well, because I would feel that democracy relies on truth and it relies on clarity of information. I'm afraid... I must state this. Obviously, you'd probably recognise from the kind of things I'm saying that I voted for Remain, and I still believe that we should remain in the European Union. Mm-hmm. Probably to make matters worse for you, I actually live in France, so my position is going to be terribly precarious if we have a no deal.
Precarious? What's going to happen to you, Sam?
Well, what's going to happen to me? Let me just state this clearly.
Are the EU such unpleasant authoritarian dictators that they'll put you in prison or throw you out? I mean, they sound like horrible people, Sam.
I'm sorry?
They sound like horrible people.
From what I've said, from me.
Well, you're saying that you're worried about your future living in France as a result of the Leave vote. I mean, are they that nasty in Brussels?
Well, Nigel, you should know you lived in Brussels for many years.
I know.
You were educated at the International School of Brussels, so I would imagine that you.
I did what? Sorry.
I believe your children were educated in Brussels, weren't they?
No, they weren't. Sam, thanks ever so much. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show, exclusive in LBC. It's 10:46. Well, there's no doubt that some Remainers are very, very passionate. They hate the referendum result. They will do anything they can to overturn it. They absolutely want a second referendum, which many of us think would be a complete betrayal of democracy. And I don't doubt it, that when some of these people call and say what they say, they mean it. However, I think we got to accept that they are very much in a minority. You know, and of course polls vary and there's margin of error and all the rest of it, but this is pretty devastating stuff, isn't it? I mean, when the Sun on Sunday poll asks people, should we just leave? No conditions, should we just leave on March 29th next year? As planned, 47% say yes, only 28% say no. That is a massive, huge, vast margin, and it's because a significant number of people who voted Remain, rather like young Liam from Liverpool, who we had on earlier, they're Democrats. They say, we've got the vote, we were promised it would be implemented, let's just get on with it. Let's go to Felix Stove and speak to Godfrey. Good morning, Godfrey.
Good morning, Nigel. Yes, well, I just hope that the Sun figures are going to be played out in reality, because I feel that our political classes are betraying us. And,
I do too.
We said we don't want to remain, and it seems to me they're being influenced by the multinational corporations who've got a lot of money to hire lobbyists and all that kind of thing, and then we get the public service broadcasters broadcasting the big business agenda.
Do you know, the remarkable thing, Godfrey, if you think about it, is the establishment Remain campaign is in full cry. It is organised, it's got its press departments, it's got its constant messaging going out. And the Leave campaign has kind of pretty much packed up. Little isolated groups all over the place. And one of the reasons I want to try and get this thing going out on the road is I think when the public start to hear the counters to what they're being told, I think that margin, Godfrey, that we've seen in the Sun on Sunday will get even bigger. And it'll mean that actually the MPs will start to become frightened of the voters in their constituencies.
Well, of course, there's nothing like change his mind of MPs being frightened of the voters in their constituencies.
Yes, that's right.
They might not get elected.
It does concentrate the mind ever so slightly, Godfrey.
They might have to get a proper job.
I'm not sure half of them could. So,
no, I'll tell you, I actually thank you. I mean, I always knew before I voted Leave that the EU organisation was undemocratic, but listening to you, you keep coming up with things that I didn't know that are even more undemocratic than I really thought it was.
I mean, the one thing, I do understand, Godfrey. I mean, people say to me, Mrs May's making a mess of it. I can agree with that. But I still fail to understand, you know, other than it's the status quo, I still fail to understand what it is about a system of government where unelected bureaucrats are the most powerful people in the system and have the sole right to make law. I still find it hard to believe, Godfrey, that anyone can think that's a good form of government.
Yes, well, I'll say I'm old enough to have been around and eligible to vote before the first EU referendum, and my reply to all this fear, uncertainty and doubt, well, we managed all right before there was an EU, why shouldn't we be all right again? And the other thing is, I know a lot of people, a lot of presenters on LBC poo-poo it. I'm afraid I want my sovereignty back.
Well, Godfrey, yes, I mean, isn't that almost one of the most basic things that human beings have wanted, for all time, is the ability to have some say directly over their own future. Godfrey, I thank you. Tracy says, we had the vote. Another shouldn't be on the cards. We should at least have our first decision respected before another vote. That's the Jacob Rees-Mogg line. Jacob supports a second referendum in 20 to 30 years' time. On Twitter, I voted Leave to leave the EU, 100% Leave. I wasn't misled by you, Boris, Trump, or even Putin. That's very, very good. How would Remainers feel if they had won and the government tried to overturn their decision? Marion, in Jarrow, I promise you, if Remain had won by one vote, there would be no public discourse, no debate about a second referendum whatsoever, because what you'd have is a parliament that overwhelmingly supported that victory by one vote. The basic problem here, folks, it's simple. The people have one view and our politicians and their big business supporters have another. That is at the heart of all of this. That's certainly what I think, anyway. What does Anna in Worcester make of all of this? Good morning, Anna.
First and foremost, I want to say I actually voted to leave.
Right.
And I haven't changed my opinion.
Right.
This is a problem I have. I've been listening avidly to the Brexit committee, and here's where the problem is. We cannot leave based on what we agreed in December. It puts us in a loop. What it's saying is, if nothing is agreed, one is not conditional on the other. If nothing is agreed, then we go round in a loop, and we're in a reverse customs position.
I think, Anna, just to explain more broadly, I think, Anna, you're referring to this backstop that Mrs. May...
Yeah.
Now, you know, when she did that, Anna, you know, I was saying this is a complete sellout, it's a complete betrayal, and I was on my own. Virtually nobody else joined me. Everybody in the Conservative Party said, oh, well, we'll just have to go along with it for the sake of party unity. Anna, I think with whatever has happened in the last 2 years with Mrs. May...
Conditionality.
Right.
Isn't agreed now. If we pull out, we do not leave on WTO terms. We're in a reverse customs union position. And a lot of people that voted out have got to understand this because there's no conditionality. And now Dominic Raab has got the brass-neck cheek to turn round and say he's trying to build it in now in terms of parallel talks and good faith. Well, a civil servant has said in international treaties where you don't agree, you have to stick by what the other side said. That's never been done before, and that is what Theresa May has done. We cannot leave the European Union because of the backstop agreed in December.
Right. Anna,
people have got to understand that.
Anna, what needs to happen is either Theresa May needs to metamorphosize over the course of the next couple of weeks and become a very different human being, or she's got rid of, and you have a new leader, and you go along and say, I am sorry. I'm really sorry. Let's apologise to Monsieur Barnier. I'm sorry. We've been wasting your time for the last 2 years. We've been playing your appeasement game. We've decided to press the reset button. Let's forget everything that's been talked about. It's not getting any of us anywhere, and let's start again. Anna, that's the only way forward with this.
If the European says, no, we're not going to press the reset button, we have an agreement to go round...
Well, then we get rid of that agreement.
How do we do that, Nigel?
Well, we vote against it. We declare we are not sticking by that agreement. That agreement was supposed to be part of a negotiation, and she went way further than she had the authority to do. She did it through deception, and ultimately, this comes down to political will. You know, the British government can pretty much do whatever it likes if it has political will. I can see you're worried about the backstop. You're right to be. Anna, thank you. I've got time for one more caller. Marty is calling from Belfast. Good morning, Marty.
Good morning, Nigel. I'm a little bit confused, and I'm hoping you can help me out by answering a question. It's over this second referendum, or potential second referendum. Nothing is going to happen until Theresa May comes back with either a yay or a nay on the deal. And that's going to be, when, October?
It's due to be October the 19th. I mean, all these things can shift and change, obviously.
Well, let's assume that miracles happen, and on October the 19th, the deal comes back. To then turn around and say, right, okay, I've changed my mind. Yes, public opinion is such that we should have a referendum on this deal. Is there not something that stopped a referendum happening within a certain period of time? Because I think from memory, it was about 6 months from when they said, right, referendum is going to happen in January, and it happened in the middle of June.
Oh, look, Marty, if they wanted...
To be well past the 29th.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, that is an argument. However, if Parliament wanted to call a referendum, and provided the Electoral Commission didn't object, I think 6 weeks it could happen in quite comfortably.
Okay, fair enough.
So
it is possible.
It is possible
to actually then happen.
It is possible,
assuming that the deal is ratified on or by October 19th.
Well, I mean, the truth of it is, of course, there'll be a deal, but it won't be ratified until it goes through every other member state parliament. So there are some that say, Marty, actually, even if the second referendum has got their way, it would come after the 29th of March 19. But that's why, actually, Marty, the big project now for those that want to remain is not a second referendum, as they're telling you. Actually, they want to suspend Article 50, and that will be the big battleground this autumn, in my view. Thank you very much indeed. Now, some very interesting findings out this week from the Sutton Trust revealing that the number of youngsters who now think it's worth going to university has fallen significantly over the last 5 years. Out of 11 to 16-year-olds, 75% think it's important to enter higher education to do well. In 2013, that figure was 86%. What do you think is behind the decline in students wanting to go to university? Is it simply down to cost and debt? If it is, call 0345 6060 973. Is it because there's no guarantee of a job at the end of the course anyway? If you think it's that, text to 84850. Or are you concerned about the political allegiances of some university staff? Maybe they don't want to be brainwashed, in which case tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC, and it all starts next. Well, last week it was the A-level results, wasn't it? And some arguments about whether they've been made harder or easier and what compensations have been put in place. But rather than students chasing university places, for the first time I think in a very long while, it was actually universities chasing students. Universities advertising, saying we're short of people on this course and on that course. And that goes hand in glove with a slight change in attitude. You see, just a few years ago, 11 to 16-year-olds were polled, and most of them thought, in fact, 86% of them thought that going to university was the right thing and would help them in life. That figure's now fallen to 75%, and the applications accordingly have fallen too. I have to say, I've felt strongly on this for years. It was Mr. Blair, of course, that nice Mr. Blair, who said he wanted 50% of young people to go to university. I always questioned the value of that. As a direct result of that, of course, we had to start charging people a lot more money, simple as. And I feel it's, for many young people, a questionable benefit. That's always been my view on it. I'm also quite worried about the politics that exists within some of these universities. But let's go to Chris McGovern, former head teacher in North London and chairman of the Campaign for Real Education. Chris, good morning to you.
Good morning, Nigel.
So are you surprised that fewer young people now see university as the right way forward?
Well, I'm not surprised, because the reality is that going to university doesn't suit probably a majority of young people. I mean, it's good news that more young people are aware of that these days, but still 75% of youngsters think they should go to university because they're persuaded that that's the best route. Schools, who seem to know very little about the world of work, push the universities. The government pushes universities. The universities themselves are offering all sorts of incentives. You get a season ticket for a football club, you get gym membership, you get a free laptop. So they're like the white boys at the...
Is this really going on?
Well, they're selling it, and it's all based, of course, on the A-level results, and the A-level results have turned out to be a counterfeit currency. I mean, you can get into university now by failing all your A-levels. I think this morning some figures came out from one of the newspapers. I think there are 68,000 places available for youngsters who failed all their A-levels.
Really?
So it's a pretty bad state of affairs. And what really worries me is that, by the way, I spoke to a conference of university admissions tutors a couple of years ago now. I sat alongside Professor Les Ebden, who's the man who for the government is basically the admissions czar. He's in charge of fair access. So he's quite a big thing. And I said to that conference that if they want to know what happens to half of their graduates, you want to go across the road to the local coffee bar, because a lot of them are underemployed. It causes big silence in the room. And I said other things about these youngsters being led astray. They should be doing apprenticeships, on-the-job training, etc. But after that conference, 3 admissions tutors from quite important universities took me aside privately. They said, thank God you said that, because no one else will say.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
So are you telling me, Chris, that after 25 or 30 years of the public increasingly thinking that if their young son or daughter gets a degree in an ology, that actually that's not taking them forward very much?
No, look, if you've got a bright academic youngster, of course going to university is going to maximise their potential. But, I was asked quite recently about a fairly new course, been up and running for a couple of years at Nottingham Trent University. It's a degree course in heavy metal music. Now,
I'm sorry to laugh.
Said, look, you don't need to be doing a degree to be a heavy metal rock music, and a lot of the support I got came from the heavy metal music brigade. They said, this is rubbish. You don't need a degree in heavy metal music to become a rock star or heavy metal musician. A lot of these youngsters are doing courses. They're not going to lead to employment, and they're going to lead to 50, maybe £60,000 worth of debt. And, you know, they walk the green mile, really, to sort of unemployment or underemployment. No future, lots of debt.
If we sent fewer people to university and we encourage vocational training, where, by the way, Chris, as I'm sure you know, there are massive shortages of people in this country who are qualified as engineers, nurses and many, many other things. But if we sent fewer, could we reduce the levels of debt that people are leaving with?
Yeah, and the thing is, a lot of these youngsters will never pay back their debt.
I know.
They're never going to get a job which is going to allow them to pay back their debt. So we're building up even more debt. You know, at the Campaign for Real Education, we've said for some time that what we should really be doing, if we want to catch up with the most advanced economies, we should be having our GCSE exams at the age of 14. I mean, currently we're about 3 years behind the Chinese, the Singaporeans, the Japanese in our educational standards. We should have GCSE at age 14, and then we should have either an academic pathway for those going to university and a vocational pathway for those who are not necessarily academic. But we've got to get over the snobbery that somehow an academic is more important than, should we say, a plumber or electrician.
Yes, yes.
We need, I mean, London, for example, we need bricklayers to build the houses for the housing crisis. You can earn over 100 grand as a bricklayer in London. And we're disparaging that and saying,
we've got this snobbery, Chris. We've got this snobbery, haven't we, in this country, about people who want to learn trades and skills. I don't understand it. Do you, Chris? I mean, by the way, I really find a lot of what you've got to say very interesting, very, very refreshing, because we hear too little of it. Is there any prospect of any of this changing in the next few years?
Well, there's a slow awakening, and to be fair to the government, they get most things wrong, but they are going to introduce what's going to be called a T level, which is going to be a technical level. But the problem is, you know, there aren't enough high-quality apprenticeship courses available. There are apprenticeship-type degrees, but there are only 10,000. There are 300,000 other courses, so there's not enough being done. And if there's a way of getting it wrong, the government generally finds it. I mean, even this morning we had a former Secretary of State, Kenneth Baker, and I worked with him 30 years ago, so quite a long time ago now, but even he's now saying, you know, we've gone wrong because what we're doing, we're not catering for those children who are not necessarily academic. I mean, one of the reasons why we need immigrants in this country is because we haven't got the skilled labour.
I know.
If we could only educate our children into being the plumbers, the electricians and so on, then we wouldn't need to have all the immigrants coming in to help us out. So it is a scandal. Is it going to improve? You must be joking. I've been working on this. I'm a lone voice. The reason why you don't hear many people talking like I talk is because if you talk like I talk in the state sector, you lose your livelihood. Happened to me some years ago. I had to move into the private sector to teach, having taught in big comprehensives. So no one will speak in the profession. They're not going to speak up other than to say, look, everything's fine, leave it to us, we're the experts. Well, we've had enough of these so-called experts, and we need to get back to some common sense. The rest of the world goes along the two pathways, vocational and academic. You go to Switzerland, they start doing that at 11, they have grammar schools. And you go to China, they just started at 14. Germans start at... most of these successful countries are having a vocational and they're having a technical. Go to Singapore, top of the league table internationally, they have polytechnics as well as universities. We've got to have the two pathways. It should start at 14, and at 14, youngsters should be doing vocational or academic.
No, it's very interesting. And Chris, finally, Toby Young has written a piece in the Mail on Sunday, a very powerful piece, saying universities, they're the madrasas of the left. And he's been talking about the sheer level of political bias, almost brainwashing, that's taking place in universities, almost suggesting, Toby Young, and he is a Tory, but almost suggesting that Tony Blair thought by sending more youngsters to PC universities there'd be more Labour voters.
It's incredible, isn't it? Look, I know Toby Young, who was a pupil of mine many years ago.
Oh, wow.
He taught in Devon, and his father was a great radical education.
And how was he as a pupil?
He's a naughty boy. And he didn't do very well. I didn't teach him very much, but he was quite a naughty boy. But anyways, I think he's a notable figure now because he speaks against the grain. Look, we have a real problem in universities. I recall only a few weeks ago doing a programme for Channel 4 television, and I was interviewed for the best part 3 or 4 hours, and it was about statues. There's a big problem in the university at the moment about should you pull down these statues. They don't like God, Kipling, don't like Rose. Big programme about that. I did an hour's programme. They censored virtually everything I said, almost, because what I said they couldn't answer. I said, look, we have got a problem in this country with statues, perhaps, but look, one of the most recent statues to be be erected in London is of the Jamaican nurse Mary Seacole. Now, she's an important figure, deserves a statue, but she was a racist. She called the Turks degenerate Arabs, worse than fleas. She was a great supporter of the British Empire, and she was quite happy to use the N-word, by the way. And I said, if you're going to present a programme about racism, you've got to look at Mary Seacole as well, because she's a hero in many ways. But she didn't have these conformist views of the 21st century. She had the same views as Cecil Rhodes.
Because it was a different time.
You know, only a couple of weeks ago, they painted over the Rudyard Kipling poem of the...
Yeah.
When I was head teacher in North London, I used to give every school leaver, a copy of that poem, because it tells you all you need to know about life. Now, you know, it's censored, it's forbidden.
Is it, and this desire in universities, is it the students that are doing this, or is it actually the lecturers that are pushing this?
It's both, of course, and it's also the schools. I mean, the schools are coming through, the children are coming through from school, they're effectively brainwashed. We have a national curriculum for history. By the way, I have to write it with Michael Gove, so I know what I'm talking about on this one. It doesn't require the teaching of any specific event from British history, nor any personality, but it does require the teaching of West African history and Islamic history. So the children are getting... I worked with some the black community in Lewisham, and they said to me, Chris, they said, the problem in our schools is that our kids, and there's a black community, they're getting a non-stop diet of slavery and deprivation, whereas the POS kids at Eton and Harrow, they're getting Nelson and Wellington. Why can't we have a bit of that? Because that's how you make progress in society. Not just doing slavery, it's important, but you've got to do the other landmarks. And Britain is a great country, and children should learn about that.
They should. Chris McGovern, thank you very much for joining us. Well, he was pretty plain-spoken there, folks, wasn't he? Chris McGovern, former head teacher in North London and chairman of the Campaign for Real Education, and he's seriously questioning, you know, the merit of university for many of our young people. I have to say that is a view that I feel very strongly about. You know, tell us I'm right. Tell us McGovern's right. Tell us McGovern is wrong. 0345 6060 973. And this business about political bias, it's not just here in Britain, it's in America. I spoke at Lafayette College in Pennsylvania earlier this year, doing a big debate against Vicente Fox, the former Mexican president. And I was told when I got there by security, there are protests, Mr. Farage, so come with us and we'll take you in the back of the building. Oh, goodness me, I don't know what's going on here, although I'm fairly used to it. Anyway, I was later shown a photograph of the protests. It wasn't the students, it was all the professors with their big slogans, ban Farage from campus. What on earth is going on? Wouldn't it be right that our young people should be taught free speech and free thinking? Not that one point of view is absolutely right. I wonder whether that's why, in some cases, 18-year-olds who've got a conservative disposition, a centre-right disposition on the world, maybe think, I can't bear the thought of going to university because of the way they're going to speak to me, because of the way they're going to deal with me. I don't know. Let me know what you think. But for now, you're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC, and it is 11:16. So the A-level results came out last week, and a lot of youngsters, those that got the grades they wanted and going to universities that they wanted to, are fine. Others who may not have done as well as they'd hoped, but are not finding it difficult to find places. And it's very interesting that Chris McGovern from the Campaign for Real Education said there are 68,000 places still vacant for those who failed all of their A-levels. Does it actually make sense? If people fail at their A-levels, for them to go on to university, might people not be better off getting a trade, a skill, where they might actually get paid rather more than many of their friends who are going to university and coming out with 50 grand's worth of debt trapped around their neck? Or maybe you think, no, McGovern and Farage are wrong. As many young people as possible should go to university to get a degree in heavy metal music. You know, is it worth a £50,000 debt to get a degree in heavy metal music? I don't think it is, but please tell me I've got it wrong. I also wonder whether, actually, for a lot of young people, it isn't about the lifestyle. They're going because they think it's going to be 3 years of partying and really great fun. I'm not against great fun. I'm very pro people having great fun. I'm just not very pro young people wasting 3 years of their lives, and that's what really worries me. Let's go, and by the way, if you've just got your A-level results, you know, let me know why you're going to university, why you're not going to university. Daniel is a first-time caller from Belter in Derbyshire. Daniel, good morning to you.
Good morning, Nigel. How are you?
I am well. So, are you surprised or not that fewer people now want to go to university?
Not at all. I'm a higher apprentice / degree apprentice. I took a bit of time to make my decision. in fact, I turned up at my first job after leaving A-levels in France the day of the referendum, told them the way I voted, and yeah, I didn't make many friends, but...
That's okay, I've spent my life doing that. So you're 20 years old now, Daniel?
Yeah, so I've been doing a higher apprenticeship for a year.
Yep.
I took a bit of time out to make my decision, as I said, but throughout my whole A-level experience, I was told by my teachers, you must go to university, you must go to university.
Yes.
But what I found is when people had written off to university, applied for their places, they got unconditional offers, and they stopped turning up to school because they felt that they had got into university now, they need not apply themselves. I don't blame anyone going to university. I think there's a set amount of trades and jobs that do require a degree, but I would completely champion becoming an apprentice at every single step.
And can I ask, Daniel, the apprenticeship you're on, is this a government scheme or a private company scheme?
It's with a private company, and from day one I've been treated with so much respect. I've travelled the world. I get my degree. Wow. I get that part of university work and that university life and the social interaction that a lot of people would say is the preferred route for them, for their choice of university. I get a good wage for my age. I get a lot of support. I'm on a pension scheme. I'm looked after completely. And
so no regrets, Daniel. Missing university, good decision.
I wouldn't go to university.
Okay, terrific. Daniel, thank you very much indeed. Interesting, wasn't it? There's somebody who's, been... and wasn't it interesting? He made the point Chris McGovern made. Pressured. Told at school, you must go to university. He's out there doing a private company apprenticeship. He's studying at the same time. He's even on a pension scheme. Doesn't sound bad, does it, really? Kalpana is a first-time caller from Wembley. Good morning.
Good morning, Nigel. Just wanted to speak to you about my daughter, who's gone through the A-level process. Unfortunately, missed out a medical place, a medicine place, for 4 marks on maths.
Well, it can be tough, can't it, this system?
Well, it's she's had to go for medicine. You have to go through a tough process to get to this stage, and then to turn around and say you've missed out by 3 points. You just get an unsuccessful on your UCAS application. Pretty upsetting. We've had to go through the remarking situation. She's not eaten for 4 days. She's been crying. She's really upset because she's built herself up to, and the government are saying, we want, doctors. She's British born and brought up. Should be the ideal candidate.
Isn't the answer for her to retake these exams?
For 4 marks?
Yes, absolutely. Look, I know this can be horrible. This can be horribly cruel, but you know something? All through life, there are a series of events that take place where you either win by a bit or you lose by a bit, and it can be pretty horrible and pretty hurtful. And when someone's 18 years old and they've set their mind on something, it's pretty heartbreaking for them. And I understand.
It's very heartbreaking, yeah. And the thing is, you have to repeat it. You'd have to spend a year out of the education system to just do this one exam again. Crazy. I think the universities should look at it holistically, because it's not just the exam that she's done, and for 4 points. She's had to do the interview, the application form, the personal statement, and a UK CAT. She's got a very high score, work experience. She's done it all. And then for this, they should have a system like America where you get offered based on your results and stuff. And then whatever happens, you go straight in, as long as you've had your offer.
Yeah, she's fallen into a very, very tough place, and I'm sorry, but there must be ways that you can retake A-levels in a few months' time. There are ways you can do it. I don't know what it costs to go through that, but she certainly wouldn't have to wait for a whole year. It may be another year before she goes on to university, but hey, she could find a job during that period or whatever. But I do think, Calpurnia, listen, here's me giving advice to universities, but I do honestly think if this was my daughter in this situation, I'd be saying, look, it's horrible. You've set your heart on it. Let's find a way to retake these in a few months' time. That's my view. Calpurnia, thank you for your call. And, you know, it's true, isn't it? Life is like that. You know, it can happen at GCSE, it can happen at 18 with A-level. It can happen because you get picked for the football team, or you don't get picked for the football team, or you win an election, or you lose an election. But life is full of these kind of incidents where sometimes you win and sometimes you lose, and it can be very, very cruel, hurtful and unfair. That's a case of somebody who wants to go to university but can't quite get the degree that she wants. But many others are saying, do you know what? We're going to university because everybody else is. We're going to university because it's going to be a party. We're going to university because our teachers are telling us we have to. And some are beginning to think, is it worth a £50,000 debt for a degree in heavy metal music? Let's go to Lorraine in Chelmsford. Lorraine, good morning to you.
Good morning, Nigel. Thank you for taking my call. It's
Not a
lovely
bit.
to speak to you. Being the cynic that I am,
right.
I can think of 5 reasons why the Blair government pushed for the kids to go into university.
Right.
1, indoctrination.
I'm going to come. Right? Yeah, well, I'm going to come to that in a moment at a bit more length. But so I'll pass on that for now. But 1, indoctrination. Yeah. 2.
To manipulate the employment figures, the unemployment figures.
That may have been valid then, but now, with unemployment at the lowest since 1975, it wouldn't be. 3.
At the time, I was talking about when the Blair came.
Yeah, no. I get that. I get that, but it wouldn't be so relevant now. Yeah.
More jobs for the EU to come in at a lower standard, where our leavers would have been taking then jobs.
What? Because they wouldn't have had. Okay, I'm not sure. Go on. 4.
More in debt to the bank.
I feel like I'm being examined here, you know. more debts to the banks, yeah, right.
Yeah. And it's big business for the universities. It's all about money.
Well, I think, yes. I mean, the universities, of course, the money matters to them hugely, and of course, they get some money from the European Union, albeit it's our money that's been recycled. Lorraine, if you had an 18-year-old boy or girl right now who wasn't particularly academic and didn't know what they wanted to do in their lives, would you recommend university?
My son is a scaffolder. He's 24.
Yep.
Many of his friends went to university and they've come out and they're working in coffee shops. My son is on £170 a day.
Yeah, so he made the right choice, Lorraine.
He certainly did.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed, Lorraine. Well, it's interesting, isn't it? You see, actually, and the earlier caller said a bricklayer in London can earn £100,000 a year. I'm guessing to do that, they're going to have to work pretty damned hard and have their own company and employ a couple of people. But hey, there is real money in trades, folks. Real money in trades. And it'll last you for decades. And yet, we seem to think, through our education system, oh, no. You absolutely must go to university for reasons that I simply don't understand. I'm going to talk in a moment a little bit more about political bias within universities, and I wonder whether that might be putting a few people off too. I think we've got a real problem that we're not teaching our youngsters critical thinking. I'll come to that in a moment, but for now, you're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It is now 11:30, and before I get back to universities, a report from a team at Edinburgh University, and they've written something called the Journal of Cleaner Production, and they are suggesting that some farmers are throwing away, dumping up to a third of the food produce that they have to sell. And the reason is very, very clear. It is because of EU regulations that emphasise the cosmetic appearance of fruit and vegetables as opposed to their nutritional quality. This applies across 12 different types of fruit and vegetables. Now, you've heard all the stuff about bendy bananas, you've heard all the stuff, because we don't grow them here, but the Curvature of Cucumbers Directive, I used to carry a copy of it round with me, and you can't sell apples that have got certain marks on them or a certain sizes. So we're dumping, some of these farmers are dumping a third of their fruit and veg production. That strikes me as being absolute, complete and utter madness. I'm going to suggest to the pro-Remainers, maybe a benefit of leaving is there'll be more fruit and vegetables to buy, it'll be cheaper, it just won't be quite as pretty. Now, on to the universities. Well, we've talked a little bit about debt. We've talked a little bit this morning about degrees in heavy metal music. What about this for political bias? And this really, really worries me. And again, I mentioned Toby Young earlier, founder of a free school and you know, quite a well-known educationalist. And he writes this morning, that a survey done in 2015, which appeared in the Times Higher Education Supplement, found that 46% of university employees intended to vote Labour. 22% intended to vote Green, and that only 11% were Conservatives. And guess how many were UKIP? 0.4%. That in a year when UKIP got 12.6% in a general election. So, you know, it is politically way, way, way stacked to the left. Now, you may say that doesn't matter, because a professional can admit they're to the left, but actually act in a way that gives people both sides of an argument. Jack Dorsey from Twitter was on CNN yesterday. He said, well, we are, of course, as people, we are on the left at Twitter, but we try to make sure that what we do is in the centre, though that is very open to question at the moment. But this is even more shocking, isn't it? You know, the no platforming of speakers. Jermaine Greer been no platform. Peter Tatchell has been no platformed. And I thought most shockingly, Dr. Adam Perkins, a lecturer at King's College London, and he was prevented from talking at a university because he wanted to give a speech entitled "The Scientific Importance of Free Speech." That was banned. What the hell is going on? Surely the whole point about university is you say to young people, here's a problem. Here are two solutions. You make your own mind up which of those you think is the right approach to life. It's called critical thinking. Without it, we are not going to produce people who are fit to live in the world. And I've had this row with Nick Clegg. You know, I genuinely think we're virtually brainwashing young people through our universities. And I think that actually is putting some conservative-minded people off going to university. I really, really do. Tell me I'm wrong. 0345 6060 973. Let's go to the Devon town of Dartmouth and speak to Archie. Archie, good morning.
Good morning, Nigel. How are you?
I am well. So, fewer youngsters want to go to university. Is that a good thing or a bad thing, Archie? He's gone. He's gone. Oh, dear. I think he was sort of walking along the beach from the sounds of it, wasn't he? Daniel is a new caller from Basingstoke. Daniel, good morning.
Morning, how are you?
I am well. So, is it vital to go to university?
I think for certain subjects, I think it's good. Say, for example, if you're studying like physics or something on those lines.
Yep.
But I think for a lot of subjects, I don't think it's really needed. I mean, I left sort of college at AS levels. I'm 23 now. I was a bit lost when I left, but didn't really get on with the whole sort of system. And so worked my way between industries, went from marketing, then took a U-turn to fashion. Now I've ended up in finance, and it's worked out really well. But I think it's a lot more valuable going into industries and sort of working away from the bottom as such. And those 4 years that you spend at university, personally, I think could be a lot better spent out in the working world.
Yeah, a lot of people are told, though, Daniel, that to work in finance, for example, which is where you are now, to work in finance, you've got to have a degree to get accepted in the first place. That's the argument that's often put.
Well, I started right at the bottom where I was making sort of 230 calls a day and just basically grinding as hard as I could and grafting, and then I've worked my way up the sort of the pole, so to speak. So, I mean, I think to a point it does take a bit of luck. I mean, I was quite lucky to get the interview in the first place.
Yep.
And it did take a good 100 or so CVs sent out, but I think if you put the hard work in the long run...
Daniel,
you can reap benefits.
Daniel, I can't believe what I'm hearing. You're a 23-year-old who believes in graft and hard work.
I know, it's strange, though.
Really, really odd. I thought the world owed you a living. I thought it would just all come to you without doing anything.
Well, the ironic thing is, actually, I mean, just one more point, if I might.
Yeah, do, please. I'm enjoying this.
I'm actually, I've got one of my friends on at my job who studied economics, and he was struggling to get a job after he finished university. And we got him into my job, and then I got headhunted for a new finance job and got him into that one as well. So it just shows, I mean, he was really, really struggling, and it's almost, in some cases, about who you know.
Do you know what, Daniel? You make your own luck. And networking and being out there and meeting people and remembering people's names and turning up on time for meetings and being turned out looking respectable. And, you know, everyone thinks I sort of come from Victorian England when I suggest these things. But I tell you what, it makes a heck of a difference. I didn't go to university. I chose not to. I chose to go straight into the commodities business when I was 18, and I've never doubted for a moment that for me and my personality it was dead the right thing to do. Daniel, great call. Keep grafting, keep working. That was great. That was encouraging. Francis says on Facebook, I got into nursing without a degree in the early 1980s, and I am the best that there is. Francis, that's extraordinary. The Muhammad Ali of nursing there on Facebook. Hazel says, bring back technical colleges and apprenticeships. They would be far better than a university degree. For some people, yeah. By the way, folks, I am not saying people should not go to university. Please do not take that. There are many, many people for whom it is absolutely the right thing for them to do. However, I think there's probably half the number who are doing it because everybody else is doing it, and their peers are doing it, and it looks like fun, and they're not, I don't think, really advancing themselves. I get on SMS the idea that 18-year-olds should borrow £40,000 to obtain a degree that may prove worthless appalls me. Universities have become, first and foremost, revenue raisers supporting wholly unnecessary jobs. Bad economics, period, says Mark in Scarborough, who's clearly been taking English lessons from Donald J. Trump, the kind of thing that he would say. OK, I met a chap that was annoyed he couldn't get a job in engineering management, even though he had a degree in medieval poetry. Universities are a waste of space, says Steve. Well, the old argument was, of course, that if you had a degree in classics, even though that may not be directly applied to the job that you went for, but your mind was disciplined and your mind had been trained. And I suspect if you're getting, you know, a first in something like classics, your mind probably actually is very adaptable. But for many people, doing degrees that are not as high up the academic spectrum as that, I don't think they're really helping themselves. My nephew's 24. He works in the London area as a bricklayer. Working for a contractor, he earns up to £2,000 per week. Well, there's a bit of evidence backing up what we heard earlier. But that would, of course, include getting up early in the morning and working hard. It does seem, and I've employed a lot of graduates and non-graduates over the course of the last 25 years, and I have to say, had some graduates who thought that actually, you know, being in at 7:30 in the morning and getting the coffee for the boss was not what you're supposed to do in life. Well, I was brought up differently. Let's go back to Dartmouth and see if Archie is able to speak to us. Archie, hi.
I haven't listened to you, Nigel, and I've got to say I agree with everything you said. I came from a family of 5,
yep,
and the 3 of us lads were written off as duffers. Basically, I had some learning difficulties with dyslexia, which wasn't sort of recognised in the 60s and 70s.
Yes.
So I was written off anyway, but my sister was a genius. And she went on to university, and she was a genius. And she was one of the few girls in the whole area, like a 5-mile radius that I knew that went to university.
Uh-huh.
And she had the brains to do this, and she went on and became a dyslexia specialist and a speech therapist. So
wow.
It was a really worthwhile thing.
So she was right for university, and it was the right choice for her.
Absolutely. However, the 3 lads, the 3 of us, are all self-employed businessmen. Mm-hmm. We all monetarily have earned as much as she has. And yet we were all written off because, like you said, we were grafters. We had a focus, we had a vision, and we moved on it. I mean, I've privately educated both of my daughters because of the experience I had in the education system in the 60s and 70s. It was pretty unsympathetic, wasn't it, to people who were dyslexic? and not only that, you had all these hippie-type teachers. You had the old school guys who had the old, the brill creamed hair and the leather patches who really made sure you learnt a lesson and had discipline. And then you had these, I want to be your buddy, flower power type guys.
I know, Archie, I was at school in the 70s. I recognise both those types of school teachers very, very clearly indeed. Archie, do you think there's too much pressure on youngsters to go and get a degree that may not help them?
Well, I've got two daughters. My one daughter's just going off to a university now. She wants to become a surgeon.
Yep.
Which is great.
Absolutely.
My daughter is a little bit more like me, not so much of an academic. She's been to a local agricultural college. She's got the sort of wherewithal to be able to speak to people. So sales is the sort of direction she's going off in, which I think is excelling. It's horses for courses, Nigel. Like
it is. No, absolutely. Archie, I thank you. There's a little bit of breeze on that mobile phone. Archie, who's done well monetarily, possibly calling from a yacht there in Dartmouth. I don't know. Good morning, Nigel. Here we are. This is one. Scrap all colleges and universities. All kids from 16 should do national service with the armed forces for 5 years. Comes from John, a truck driver in Kent. John, even if you were right, it ain't going to happen. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC, and it's now 11:46. Well, my question about the politics of universities is getting some response. Hi, Nigel. My name is Matthew. I'm at university doing history. All I will say, it's so PC. They say it shouldn't be political, but they allow societies on Labour and Lib Dems to exist, but not others. Sometimes I feel I just can't get more involved, as I have similar views to you, and as a young person who voted Brexit, I would be torn apart. It's just awful, isn't it? I think universities should be allowed and all political views should be there. There should be freedom of speech. Keep up the good work, Nigel. I just find it... it is not the first time I've had this, but you get young people, 19, 20 years old, scared to say what they believe for fear of what they'll get, not just from their peers, but from the lecturers at university too. William from Newcastle says, a lack of free discussion in universities, the demise of a state grammar school, has contributed to this lobotomised higher education system. Well, he says here, at grammar school, pupils were taught how to think, not what to think. There was a good social mix, not like the current apartheid between comprehensives and private schools. William, you're absolutely right. There is economic apartheid between the private system and the public system. And I went to a school where, in the year that I went, 50% of the boys that went to my school were there on scholarships. 50% came from, and they were means tested on this, 50% came from families, at the lower end of the income scale. And that, I think, gave us greater social mobility. Let's go to Harry in Nottingham. Good morning, Harry.
Morning, Nigel. Okay, so in essence, when you go on about how left-wing universities are, it's a lot worse than you think. To begin with...
Worse than I think?
Yeah, it's worse than you think. I'm calling anonymously for a reason.
Okay.
And literally every single one of my lecturers, the first thing they said to us was, I'm a feminist, which is just...
Oh, right.
I don't see why we need to know that, frankly. One of my lecturers, and I did politics, was a revolutionary socialist, and to the point where he didn't even vote for Corbyn because he wasn't left-wing enough. Right. And this same lecturer...
That's pretty left-wing, Harry, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, it's unbelievable. But this same lecturer pushed us to go, when the university lecturers went on strike the other year for better pay, etc. We were heavily pushed by this lecturer to go out on strike, even to the point of missing classes. He was determined to have us out there, waving the red flag with him, and frankly, none of us were interested. But, we've had forms where we've been asked with gender, and what's included in this is something called gender queer, and there's up to 12 genders on these forms, and frankly, it's just a complete madhouse. We've got quote-unquote inclusive toilets, which allow people of these 12 genders as well, and it's just a nut house, Nigel.
It's one thing, Harry, to have people who are nearly all of a left-wing disposition, and the fact that survey said 22% of lecturers voted Green, I just thought it just shows you how out of touch it is with normal life. But Harry, does it affect the way they teach? Because that's what matters, isn't it?
Well, I'd say yes, it does, because, again, there's no real inclusion of right-wing opinions, but interestingly enough, it tends to be corporate neoliberal right-wing opinions that are presented to you as opposed to nationalism or, something that is opposed to actually caring about your own nation. The nation state's completely derided in these lectures. It's all open borders.
Yeah.
You think?
Yeah. Do you know, there's there's a very funny piece, Harry, by Jeremy Clarkson in today's Sunday Times. Read it. And he says that he was at a dinner party and some young people were there at the dinner party. And one of the adults said, well, I really do think we've got to get a grip on our borders. We've got to have proper immigration controls in this country. And one of the youngsters started sobbing. I mean, because they actually believe that if you believe in border controls, you're some sort of neo-Nazi, because that's what they've been taught to think.
Well, that could be best presented. But interestingly enough, I mean, the students themselves, although you always get these, like, lefty virtue signalers, they're not as far gone as you think. I mean, I've had conversations behind closed doors, of course, with numerous people where they totally agree with this. They totally getting out of the EU.
Yeah.
Terrified.
Screw it. Harry, we're losing you. It's a shame. It's a great call. Yeah, and sort of Harry has to. It's rather like being a Roman Catholic, isn't it? In Protestant Britain in the sort of 18th century, you have to meet in private because you've got these opinions. Nigel, I'm Sarah, a mature student who has a BA in philosophy and social psychology. I'm now completing my MSc. I asked my tutor why all the research papers I was required to read were so left-wing. It made for an interesting debate. She said right-wing is done through think tanks and is not recognised as academic. Well, I don't know. It's very, very, as she puts at the end of her note here, it's a very one-sided form of education. We need to be teaching critical thinking. We need to be teaching people how to think, not what to think. That's what I think, and that's certainly my view. I think we're brainwashing people. Neil is on from Manchester. Neil, good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome. So, have I got this right about the lecturers all being way out on the left, or am I exaggerating? Is this some sort of myth?
Well, I'm a university lecturer, and I can say that where I haven't... Yeah, certain lecturers have certain views, but the environment I work in, I think everyone is open to debate. And I have certain opinions, and my colleagues have certain other opinions, so...
Doesn't it depend a bit, Neil? What subject you're teaching? I mean, if you're teaching math, if you're doing mathematics, for example, it's much more difficult, is it not, for your politics to come through in mathematics than it would be in history?
I mean, I teach accounting and finance, and yeah, I would agree within the more scientific disciplines. I think people are more open to debate and rational exchanges of ideas, because those fields rest on those that very activity. So yeah, I can certainly say that maybe I am fortunate that I work in a business faculty.
But do you see, Neil? Do you see the problem that we're debating this morning? I mean, firstly, that to go to university and get a huge amount of debt may not help you in the workplace, and secondly, that there is just too much bias.
Well, I mean, I think there are separate issues.
Okay.
So one is an economic one. If you, what I would say as an educator, I would say to young people, if you're going to go to university, because of the way, and I teach fintech, the way technology is shaping all fields, whether it's medicine, law, banking, technology is disrupting all of them. So what I would say, if you choose to go to university, and so say you're interested in law or medicine, I would say that's great, study that, but make sure you become an expert in whatever revolutionary technologies there are, and then you'll have huge opportunities.
Yeah. Yep. So for some people it's right, but Neil, would you agree we may be sending too many youngsters to university?
Oh, I'd prefer not to comment on that. I don't know. The honest opinion is I haven't studied that. I don't know the facts, so I will refrain.
No, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. No, Neil, I thank you. Time for one last caller quickly. Catherine from Great Yarmouth, good morning.
Good morning, Nigel.
Hi. So, university, do fewer people now need to go? Because that seems to be they're now voting with their feet.
Well, it's also what they're doing, and this is all about money. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is the problem. Medicine, you had that previous caller.
Yeah.
The universities lose. It costs them $30,000 a year to put a medical student on. It costs them $2,000 or $3,000 a year to put a surfing studies or a media studies person through a course. On one, they are losing $21,000 a year. when they get the 9,000 tuition fee. On the other, they're making 5,000 or 6,000. You were talking about the.
Are you saying, Catherine? Are you saying that our 18-year-olds are being encouraged and driven towards some subjects to make universities more profitable?
Well, that's why you can't get into medicine. We turn away 1,000 students, including the girl who was turned away for 4 marks, who's got 3 grade A's.
Yeah.
Give you some numbers. Holland, the Netherlands, has 2.6% foreign doctors.
Mm-hmm.
We have 28% foreign doctors.
Wow.
And we turn away those 1,000 a year. We have these universities, that 93% of them, the staff voted Remain. They almost all vote Labour, similar numbers for Labour. And yet you have the head of Bath Spa University got paid in 2017 a cumulative salary and benefits of £800,000. And is
there any? Catherine, I'm running out of time. Your driven by money point is fascinating, and your comparison of foreign doctors in the Netherlands and here, and we're turning 1,000 away every year, is amazing. Is there any hope of reform? Yes or no?
Yes. Get out of the EU first. Get an actual Conservative government that actually is Conservative. And
well, I tell you what, I think university reform may well come before we get a Conservative government that sounds Conservative. Catherine, I thank all of you this morning. I'll be back tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. At 3 this afternoon, it's Andrew Castle. Up next, it's Majid Nawaz.
Thank you, Nigel.